Hi everyone, my name is James Feeney. Welcome to or back to my channel. Another month has come and gone, and I'm here with favorites and reflections to share with you all. As always, I will share the decks and speak to them that I've been using the past month, both Tarot and Oracle, and then we'll dive into books where I offer basically mini reviews on whatever I've read. Then we move into miscellaneous type items, magical, spiritual, or potentially lifestyle, and then we culminate with experiences. So if you're looking to skip around, that's the order I generally go in. I will say this month has been an odd one or a strange one. Well, you'll notice I'm not where I usually am. I'm not at home. I am traveling, but this month has just felt really hazy. I've had trouble getting my thoughts together and feeling like I have purpose and direction. I've not felt the most inspired, and in true Sagittarius fashion, when in doubt, go somewhere else. I'm not under the illusion that you can outrun your problems or things that you might be going through, but I do think sometimes a change of scenery can help to offer perspective, and that's how I like to think of it. So I am contending with an air conditioner that sometimes clicks on and is a bit loud, and I believe some construction going on in the level above me, so bear with me if the sounds start to get a little bit frazzled. But without further ado, we'll dive in. Like I said, I'm not at home, so some of the things that I'm going to speak to I don't have in my possession, but I have taken some B-roll or some pictures of these things so that way you can visually see them. So if I'm looking at my laptop, I'm referencing them in that way, and I will put them on the screen for you all to see. So we'll start with the decks. The first big one, or category I should say, is the idea of the Marseille, studying Marseille Tarot, which is something I've been doing the past few months. The most and biggest highlight of as far as decks go with Marseille has to be one that was sent to me by the lovely Justin Michael, a friend of mine and somebody you may all know on YouTube. He has an amazing channel. He does great interviews and speaks to decks. He sent me a wonderful package, and a while back he had spoken to me about sending an angel deck, which is a deck, and I'll put that on the screen, and it's a lovely deck with angels. I believe it's in Spanish, and I haven't gotten enough time to fully delve into it, but he saw that I spoke to working with angels and that aspect of my practice and wanted to send that deck to me for a while, and I was super appreciative, and it's a lovely and beautiful deck. I just need more time to work with it. But he also included a Marseille deck that he's made by hand, the printing, the paper, all of that, which will be on the screen for you all to see. I was kind of blown away with the kindness and just the thought that went into what he sent me, and the fact that he sent me anything at all and what it was to me, that it blew me away. I'm speechless, actually. It's a beautiful deck and things that are just handmade, and the fact that he thought to send me a copy of this was amazing, and it really just made my month, honestly. In obviously the idea of the fact that there's the physical deck, but just what it means, and for him as a friend in this community, and the community that I have around me, and the wonderful people that I've met and have the pleasure of calling my friends at this point. So there's that. So we have the angel deck and the Marseille deck that Justin has made basically by hand, and that was really lovely. And then other decks, I'm trying to think. There was the two decks that I got from Cartogram, which makes their decks on like a linen cardstock. You can get them on Etsy. I got their version of the Dodal and the Noble. I have the Dodal one here in my, all the stuff's right in front of me, in my possession, so I will show this one on screen, but I did take some B-roll of it, I think. But this is what it looks like. It does keep that more rustic, antique type style. It's cream, it's off-white, there's a yellowing and an aged quality to it. They also sent this wonderful box that I believe is like handmade to go with it, and it's a magnetic closure. There's such an attention to detail with Cartogram as a company or the person who runs it. I'm not exactly sure how I would classify it, but they're just lovely to work with. I know that you can also get handmade decks from them where the paper is handmade and the printing process is done in that way. But this is the more, I don't want to call it mass market, I guess like the indie produced linen cardstock version of the Dodal. Now another Dodal that I've worked with, and actually I received this one this month, is from Sullivan Heisman, and this one was definitely inspired by the lovely Masha from Musings by Masha and her channel. And this is a more, I guess, like hand cut and printed version of the Dodal. This one has really stark lines. The coloring is extremely vibrant and the cardstock is thick and luscious. They're a little bit not uniform in size and they have sharp corners, and I've loved them for study and working really intentionally with the images versus, for example, a more linen cardstock where I'm shuffling and doing readings. This is definitely more for study and I'm enjoying it quite a bit. And then we also have the Midnight deck by Gergely Bagamary, and I believe this is now out of print. I didn't know that at the time that this was going to be out of print, and I know I wrote a blog post on it too, but I know that the creator has plans and is already working on another deck. I just really enjoy the faces, and something about it feels very like trickster and underhanded and sinister and just fun and cheeky, not in a negative way. And I really enjoy working with it for that reason. There's something to it that just grabs me in a more subtle fashion. So there's that deck. The Thoth that I brought with me is my water damaged beautiful greenie that I hold near and dear to my heart. So this of course is one that I'm using quite a bit. I know I've been speaking a lot about the Marseille and showing that on my channel, but the Thoth is never far away. It's always close at hand. I'm always using it. I'm just not maybe sharing it as much because it's not where the bulk of my studies lie. And for me, the way that I have a spiritual practice and work with tarot is primarily through the idea of study. I love being a student, and so anything I can do to learn and read and engage with something in a way where I'm getting a better understanding of it is how I identify with the world around me and objects and practices. And so that's why you're seeing a lot of the Marseille at this time. But Thoth is definitely still at the top of the rotation, not far away at any given point. And now the last two decks that I will share, I believe these are two that I think I've talked about before and shared in previous months potentially. We have the Holistic Astrology Cards for Guidance, Forecasting, and Healing by Carney Zor, and that's what that looks like. And I mean, this is just the image on top, but I mentioned that I like to use these for the astrological add-ons that I do for some clients in readings where I factor in birth chart aspects essentially into a tarot reading where they may apply, and so I really enjoy that one. And then, of course, a playing card deck, because that's something that's a staple for me at this point, and as always, or like usually, it is the Pagan Playing Cards by Usi, and they look like this, and you've seen them a million times, so I'm not going to harp on them too much. I'm not the kind of person that switches up my decks drastically each month and will have new decks coming in at all times, or at least not at this point in my practice, so there is a tendency to be a bit repetitive in that way, but that's just that. So what is more exciting for me usually and different are the books that I've read. So let's get into them. And the first one that I read is, I'm reading off my laptop, A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab, I believe is the name of the author. I'm not sure if this was a young adult novel or meant to be more mature, I guess, like literature, fiction, fantasy. It is of the fantasy variety, and the overall concept I found to be extremely interesting. I loved this book. It was a bit on the longer side, and it followed multiple perspectives of two protagonists who eventually collide, which I appreciate, and I like the dichotomy there. But the overall concept is that there are parallel universes. It's very string theory-esque, but with a more magical flair. And we have, for example, 3 Londons, and all of them are called London in all 3 of the sort of parallel, or 4, I should say, parallel universes. And some are magical, and then the one that's more, I would say, our London is called Grey London, where not much magic exists. But our protagonist is from Red London, and he's one of the rare people who can move between the worlds now that they've been kind of closed off from each other. So he moves between the Londons, and basically a lot goes on. Magic becomes threatened. There's this sort of darker force, and of course the two protagonists need to band together to solve the thing, and that's how a lot of novels work. But I found the concept extremely interesting of these parallel universes and the idea of how magic was spoken of, how some had the idea of magic as something to be worked with and this underlying life force that we neither control or are controlled by, but exist within and alongside, versus others in other Londons who seek to control it. Otherwise, they fear they will be controlled by the magic, and the mentality affecting how they interact with magic and use it. And then we have Grey London, who really doesn't really know about magic much at all, and thus there isn't much of a relationship. So I think if there's one thing to take away, it's the interesting way magic is spoken and written about within the novel. And then of course the characters were really cool and interesting, and seeing the idea of multiple worlds and how one might shift from one thing to the other, or what parallels exist, and getting your mind going in that way was so fun. So I would recommend that book. There were times when it dragged a bit, and it was one of those more predictable type of stories, but on that token, I would say it was still engaging, still interesting. It was definitely a page turner. It was action packed, so I would recommend it. The next one I finished was Seeing the World: Tarot Signposts on the Path to Perception by Jean-Claude Flournoy, translated and annotated by David Vine. So this is the English translation of Flournoy's book, which you can get on Tarot History, where you can also get his reproductions of decks, and I believe you can get it on Treadwell's bookshop, either online or in person. And I really enjoyed it. It mostly just goes through the Marseille majors, specifically the Noblet, in a very classical and historical way. So this is definitely approached from a more traditional route, and it is quite psychological. So it's not meant to be very predictive and spiritual. There is this sort of detachment from the idea of the woo, if you will. So we take the idea, I would say it mirrors the idea of the Fool's Journey, but it's more stages of psychological development. There is something very Jungian about it, but I think it was done in a way that was really poignant, and there were anecdotes and case studies, I guess you could say, as a tarot reader may have case studies with their clients, and those all seem to be really interesting. There are fun spreads, one of which I shared recently, I think it was the pyramid layout. So I would definitely recommend that book if you're interested in more tarot history, classical tarot interpretation. I didn't agree with everything within the books, and there are some things that, as far as viewpoints go, might be construed as a little bit more controversial or problematic, psychologically speaking or culturally speaking, but I attribute that more so to the time and place that this piece of literature has come from. So I try to take that all with a grain of salt, but I would highly recommend it. Then the next one that I read was Four Elements: Reflections on Nature by John O'Donohue, who is the author of Anam. I'm going to mispronounce this horribly. I'm sorry if anybody out there is Irish. Anam Cara or Anam Cara, something like that. And I read that book many months ago, and then picked up Four Elements, intending to read it right away, and never got to it. I guess other books got in the way. It kind of worked its way down the bookshelf and got lost. And I stumbled upon it, feeling very called to the idea of the elements, trying to get in tune with myself. Like I said, this month has been feeling rather hazy for me, and I've just felt like I'm not in touch with myself. And so I sought out this book because I remember reading Anam Cara or Anam Cara and feeling like I had a better understanding of this sort of philosophy for life. So I read The Four Elements. I would highly recommend it. I think of course, it's written in, I would consider it very poetic prose that are very essay-like in sections. So there's the section of fire, water, earth, and air, essentially, and it's more so thinking about them as these grand ideas in life, things like gnosis and the way that we interact and self-identify, and the theory of a soul that's more abstract. And I think in taking the idea of these elements, one can then transpose what you're reading onto tarot, if you are a tarot reader, onto astrology in terms of the planets, the signs, and the houses. So you can take from this, I would say, from this book, what the core values are and use them in other facets of spirituality in a way that I think enhances your work or your practice. So I enjoyed it for that reason, and it's also a very meditative book. It's the kind you would take to a park on a nice sunny day and just maybe like sip a glass of something and read the book. It really gives you this relaxed meditative feeling. So really enjoyed that. And then the fourth and final book that I read was actually an audiobook, and I mentioned that in my vlog, or my travel vlog, where I did my road trip and in the car. This was my first full audiobook. I have a lot of trouble listening to podcasts and audiobooks. They're not my favorite, and I stand by that after having fully listened to one, but I do think it was great. I will put it on the screen so you can see the name and the author. It's basically just a beginner astrology book, but I think it was extremely comprehensive, and I liked the style of the writer. I will say sometimes it felt as though the writer was trying to cater to the idea of modernity and prefacing what they had to say to a point where it detracted from what was being said. I understand that there's this sort of self-deprecating aspect to it. I know I do that quite often on my channel when I don't want to be, oh, I'm sorry if the lighting's horrible, when I don't want to be misunderstood or misconstrued, and I want to make sure that what I'm saying is received in the way I want it to be received. But that being said, there was a little bit too much of that going on in the book instead of the talk about astrology at points. But that being said, as a critique, overall, I think it was quite comprehensive. It got to the point. It made, I would say, the baseline concepts easy to understand, and I like that it broached various facets of astrology, like Hellenistic versus tropical versus Vedic and other Eastern types, and the historical part was actually really interesting. And of course, I don't think auditory or like listening to raw information as a book is ideal. I think audiobooks are probably better suited to novels and narrative styles of writing. But that being said, I still enjoyed it nonetheless. And for those who do like audiobooks, I think you might enjoy it. I know there is, of course, the written version of this book that you can seek out, and I do think it would be great written, and I might actually go about doing that just so I can feel like I can compare. But those are the 4 books I read this month. Those were the decks, and now we're into the miscellaneous. And the first one I'll mention is actually another thing that was included in the package from Justin, and it is an ogham, basically, the apple ogham, and it's on a little apple branch, and I guess he had found that in the park and sent it to me, and I thought that it was wonderful. He also sent a picture of the tree that he got it from, and it was the most beautiful apple tree I think I've ever seen, and I have it in my altar now, which I would show you, but I'm not at home. It was just really sweet, and that package overall, I'll mention again, was just, it made my month, and it was, that kind of thing just blows my mind. So yeah, that was awesome. And then other things, I have my tarot, sort of my very minimalist tarot on the go kit, which I will be posting a video about shortly, so I'm not going to take you through everything that's in it, but I took this with me. Sometimes I'll use a larger bag and put a bunch of things in it, but this is when I really just want to travel light, and I value this, sorry, the fan's kicking on, I apologize, but I value this when, oh, it's quite loud, so I value this when I am really just looking to go somewhere quickly, either to a park or a cafe, or jump in my car, something like that. So there's actually this pin on it that I got at a flea market, along with this lapis lazuli ring. When I was visiting friends in the city, we went to a Brooklyn flea market, and they had these big piles of metal that you can pick out of, and it's weighed, and so you just pay by the weight. And so it was really a steal, because this is a silver and lapis ring, and I don't know what the pin is made of. I mostly just thought it was funny because it was a J and it had little faces on it, but I got it basically for a steal, and so that was awesome. And another big item is my travel altar, now that I am traveling and I have decided to take my magical practice, my spiritual practice with me. I've already used this a little bit, but I intend to use it more and to make a full and comprehensive video on it, but I've been really engaging with it quite a bit, and it's forced me to reduce my practice in a way that's helpful, where it's less confusing. And I will say that cutting out the fluff has been something that I found very helpful for getting my thoughts clear. And so if you find that you feel like you're wading through a sea of uncertainty and nebulous thoughts in your practice, reducing things might be helpful. Just a pro tip, or at least a tip that worked for me and may work for you. It may not, but Travel Altar is an item I've been using and loving quite a bit lately. On another note, something that's a bit newer to me, the idea of art. I've never considered myself an artist, and technically speaking, I don't think my technical skills are very good, but you may have seen my recent tarot journal video where I include a doodle each day or a picture that I've drawn, and I've kind of expanded upon that a little bit more in terms of, well, here, I'll just share this journal that I got. It's an idea diary, I guess is what it's called, and I've started to fill it. I'll just show one page. I might make a bigger, more comprehensive, fleshed out video on this topic as it evolves, but I would just use little art markers, and basically it's meant to be a little bit more like minimalist, but I think this is also inspired by my Marseille studies, where there's not a lot going on any given card image, but at the same time it communicates something so abstract and big and weighty, and so I don't think a picture necessarily needs to have a lot of detail. I don't think there need to be a lot of words written to communicate a topic or an idea, and I've really been enjoying, in a spiritual way, experimenting with the idea of very few words, very minimalist imagery that can communicate something much greater and can lend itself to creative interpretation on part of me as a creator and somebody else who may be viewing it. So I have this little idea diary that I'm enjoying, and I have just gotten these art pens that I really love. These are a set of Pigma Micron markers. They're really good for drawing. They have a very fine tip, and I appreciate them for that, along with these Tombow brush tip markers, I guess, or pens. And I did get, you'll see, apologies, these larger ones that are in the shade, basically shades of gray. There's one that's kind of bluish or like lavender, but I've really enjoyed experimenting just with the idea of different tone. So of course they're all more of that gray neutral tone, but you can actually create something that seems quite colorful and vibrant just with those, as you may have seen when I held up my little idea diary on that one page. Just with those shades, you can create something. So very interesting to me to have maybe a reduced color palette and then see what I can do within the confines of something so limited, how expansive I can get with few materials, with few resources, with few colors. And so I've enjoyed that quite a bit. I think that takes us through the gambit of the miscellaneous items, and now I'll speak to the experiences. The biggest one and most obvious one being the fact that I came here. I've traveled, and so I'm in a warmer climate. I'm really hoping that just taking time alone, which is something I find I need quite a bit of as an introvert, will help me to become more clear with myself and my thoughts, to gain that perspective that I sometimes find I can't get when I'm around a lot of people, or when there's a lot of visual clutter, auditory clutter, mental clutter that comes with just being around people, and it's nobody's fault. It's more so that I just need the space away from it to help myself. So there's that. That's one experience. I mentioned that I visited my close friends in Brooklyn. They are my two best friends, and it was really nice to be able to see them both together for the first time in, I want to say, well, quite some time. I see them sometimes individually, but schedules conflict as we get older. We are adults, and it's hard to arrange extended periods of time with a group that you can get together, not to mention, obviously, the state of the world and just how things are working and running right now. So things can get difficult, but it was really wonderful to see them and felt very grounding for me in a way where I could definitely self-identify when I'm around them. And if you're watching this, seek out somebody that makes you feel like more like yourself, I guess. So if it's a family member, if it's your mom, if it's your best friend, if it's your cousin that you haven't seen in 2 years, maybe reach out, give them a call, and just let them know what they mean to you. I think letting the people who we care about know that we care about them and how much we love them is extremely important. Time is such a valuable and limited commodity. The most valuable, I should say, I think, personally. It's one that we also can never get back. We're always using it, and we can never they can never gain more. So you don't earn time, you expend time, and a lot of what we do in our life is the measurement of time, whether it's the clock or the amount of money we make is basically somebody telling you how valuable they think your time is or how much money you're willing to accept for the use of your time in a certain way. That could be an entirely its own video. I think the idea of time as a concept, as a dimension, as a form of potential energy and perception is something I work with quite a bit in my practice, and I do have plans to maybe distill that into something more concrete in the form of a video, but that I think is those are the two biggest experiences I've had in April. It has, like I said, been a bit of a hazy month for me, so a lot of the month has felt just like it drifted by, but lingered in a strange way. I hope you are all doing well. Please comment down below how you're doing if you feel comfortable doing so. It's a safe space, and I hope we can all be respectful, so I would love to learn a little bit more about how you are all doing if you experience similar feelings, and then of course the items I share, let me know what you think, if you've also worked with these items or if you have just things you want to share in general. I always read every comment. I tend to reply to every comment because I enjoy the community and anybody who watches my videos, all of those people who I see as people in my community as well. So like I said, I hope you're all well. Like and subscribe if this was fun or interesting, and until next time, bye.